Welcome back to LA's Listening Lounge. Tonight's story is titled From Wife to Witness. Settle in, take a breath, and let the story play. This is a revenge drama set in polished rooms and private hallways where reputation is currency and silence is a strategy until one woman decides she is done paying the price. This story is fiction, created for entertainment. If you enjoy character-driven drama with high-stakes fallout, please like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, Power and Polish. Carter Montgomery and Talia Montgomery were the definition of success, at least to the people who mattered. Up close, it was less a life than a performance, and Talia could feel the strain in her jaw on nights she smiled too long. In the capital's most guarded rooms, their names opened doors, donor salons behind velvet ropes, courthouse fundraisers where senators shook hands for the cameras, and foundation galas where a former president's laughter carried farther than the music. Talia learned to read a room the way other people read weather, where the smiles were real, where they were rented, where a compliment was just a hand around her wrist. Every toast came with an expectation. Every photo came with a price. Power, prestige, precision. It wasn't just how they lived, it was how they were seen. Talia carried that awareness like a clutch purse, always in hand, always heavy, never set down. In their world, being seen was its own kind of currency, and she paid in little pieces of herself without admitting it. Carter, a brilliant attorney, had built Montgomery and Associates into one of the most respected firms in the region. Judges respected him, clients trusted him, and younger attorneys wanted to be him. Talia was no less formidable. As CFO of a foundation led by a former president of the United States, she managed millions in funding, global initiatives, and high-profile partnerships. She was strategic, sharp, and respected in rooms where few women, especially black women, were invited. Together, they looked untouchable, until the small inconsistencies began to add up. Chapter 2, Cracks in the Foundation. Emma wasn't supposed to matter. She was a mid-level employee at the foundation, recently overlooked for a promotion Talia had personally approved, and in Talia's world, that usually meant quiet resentment and a few pointed comments. At first, when Emma began speaking about Carter, Talia dismissed it. Emma whispered to coworkers that her mother's estate had been stolen and that Carter had manipulated everything. Talia overheard the rumors in passing, the way people did in hallways when they thought no one important was listening. By the end of the day, she had called Emma into her office. "You're treading dangerously close to slander," Talia said. Calm on the outside, because calm was what her position required. Inside, heat climbed her throat. Carter's name was currency, too, spent carefully, defended automatically. Emma didn't flinch. "I know what he did," Emma said, and for the first time her voice almost broke. She swallowed it back like it was poison. "They told me I was being dramatic. They told me grief makes you imagine villains." Her fingers twisted together hard enough to blanch. "Look up the Greystone filing. Same caption format, same judge, same little phrases that show up like fingerprints. And if someone from his firm offers to help you with anything, anything at all, say no. I said yes once. I'm still paying for it." Talia wrote it off as workplace resentment, the kind that flared when money, proximity, and pride shared the same air. Still, after Emma left, Talia stared at the closed door longer than she meant to. Certain people didn't use that tone unless certainty had cost them something. But Emma didn't stop. She started speaking like someone who'd already been threatened, and like someone who had decided she'd rather be fired than buried. Something in Emma's voice wasn't emotional, it was certain. Chapter 3, Late Nights and Lies. Carter had been working late more and more, and he always had an explanation ready. He mentioned a big case, he blamed the demands of new partners, and he spoke with the casual confidence of a man who assumed his time belonged to him. Soon, patterns formed, missed dinners that turned into missed weekends, calls that went unanswered until her concern felt foolish, and one name that surfaced too often to ignore. Nora Robinson, a rising attorney recently made partner and handpicked by Carter himself. Chapter 4, The Night Everything Broke. It was a quiet Thursday night, the kind that should have felt like relief. Instead, Talia's skin wouldn't settle. She told herself she was being irrational, that stress had made her suspicious, and yet her hands kept tightening on the steering wheel like they knew something her mind refused to name. Talia decided not to call ahead. She drove straight to Carter's office, let the security guard greet her as if nothing in the world could touch them, and signed the visitor log with steady handwriting. His eyes flicked to the visitor log on the counter before he looked back up. Talia wrote her name anyway, neat as a signature on a check. In this building, every elevator ride had a timestamp. Every hallway had a camera. Privacy was something you rented, not something you owned. The guard glanced up with a familiar smile. Mr. Montgomery working late again? She smiled. Looks like it. She rode the elevator up to the quiet hallway and followed it to Carter's door, which sat slightly open as if the building itself had forgotten to protect him. A voice carried from inside, Nora's, soft and amused. Talia paused, listening just long enough to know she shouldn't be there. Then a floorboard whispered under her heel. She stepped closer, and then she saw Carter and Nora locked in a kiss that told the truth faster than any confession could. Time didn't stop. It slipped sideways, like her life had been bumped off its track and was now grinding metal on metal in the dark. Talia didn't scream. The sound died somewhere behind her ribs, trapped under everything she'd ever learned about composure. She didn't confront him because if she opened her mouth, she wasn't sure what would come out. Rage, grief, or something feral that would make her the spectacle instead of him. Instead, she did what she'd trained herself to do in rooms full of powerful men. She collected evidence and swallowed the pain until it had edges. She reached into her purse, took out her phone, and recorded what she could. Photos, video, proof that would not be softened by anyone's charm or explained away as a misunderstanding. Then she put the phone away and chose control over collapse. She didn't run. Running drew attention. She moved the way she did at donor receptions, controlled, unhurried, unremarkable, until the elevator doors closed and the camera above the panel could no longer see her face. Chapter 5. Silence Before the Storm. The next morning, Talia washed her face until her skin stung. She practiced a neutral expression in the mirror the way she practiced speeches, again and again, until nothing showed that she hadn't slept, that she could still taste betrayal like copper on her tongue. She wanted to throw the phone at the wall, to drive back to the office and tear the door off its hinges, to demand an explanation that wouldn't matter. But she'd spent too long surviving systems that punished women for being emotional, so she stayed still. And in that stillness, she decided he would not get to rewrite her life and call it love. That weekend, Carter tried to rewrite the story before she could. He sent flowers to her office, 2 arrangements because one would have looked like guilt. He booked a table at the private club where lobbyists tipped waiters more than some people made in a week. He talked about resetting, about a trip after her next board cycle, about how he missed her laugh. Then, like a pin pushed into velvet, the questions came. Her schedule, her lunches, whether the former president was traveling. His voice stayed warm, but Talia felt herself shrinking inside it, like the conversation was a room with the door quietly locked. By Monday, Talia understood. This wasn't only betrayal. It was surveillance with a smile. So she hired a private investigator. Discretion is non-negotiable, Talia told the investigator. He nodded once. You'll have the truth. Talia expected to confirm infidelity. What she uncovered was far worse. Chapter 6. The Scheme. The investigator's report arrived in layers, and each one landed heavier than the last. Carter was not just cheating, he was orchestrating a network that moved like a business, quiet, coordinated, and protected. Social workers, doctors, attorneys, and friendly judges played their parts. They targeted wealthy, vulnerable people, often elderly residents in assisted living who had assets and limited oversight. Once selected, the victims were isolated, convinced their families had abandoned them, and cut off from outside communication until the paperwork could do the rest. The filings even looked the same. Identical phrasing, identical paragraph numbering, as if they were stamped from one template and simply fed new names. A single physician's letterhead appeared again and again, always concluding with the same sterile line about diminished capacity, and one probate judge's signature kept repeating in the margins of their lives, approving emergency petitions with a speed that felt less like efficiency and more like certainty. Carter sat at the center of it. He recruited attorneys, managed the operation, and made sure everything looked legitimate on paper. Nora was not just an affair, she was his partner in the work and in the cover. Chapter 7. The Truth Hits Home. Emma's mother was one of the victims. Her estate, worth more than $1 million, had been placed under control, redirected, and drained under Carter's legal authority. Talia sat in silence as the investigator finished. She kept her hands folded so he wouldn't see them tremble. The investigator kept his voice low. This goes deep, he said. Federal level deep. Federal level deep. When she spoke, her voice surprised her, steady, almost gentle. Then we take it federal, she said. Not because she wanted revenge, though she did, but because she could suddenly see all the other women in all the other rooms swallowing the same metallic grief and calling it professionalism. Talia leaned back, but there was no comfort in it. Her chest felt too small for her breath. Chapter 8. The Call That Changed Everything. Talia requested a private meeting, not as a wife or a victim, but as a professional who understood exactly what was at stake. She knew what would happen if the story broke the wrong way. Donors would demand distance. Opponents would turn a foundation built on public trust into a headline about private scandal. And a former president, no matter how decent, had a legacy to protect in a city that fed on contradictions. Her boss, the former president, listened carefully, and when she finished, he stayed quiet long enough for Talia to hear her own breathing. "If we handle this privately," he said at last, "we protect the brand and lose the truth." He met her eyes. "I didn't build my life to hide predators in good suits. We're bringing in the FBI." Within days, an investigation was underway, quiet, precise, and steadily building. Chapter 9. The Fall. Talia left for a scheduled business trip the same way she left for everyone, early, composed, and carrying a bag that looked heavier than it was. At the airport, she smiled for the foundation staffer who walked her to security. She nodded at the donor who recognized her name. She played her part so well that even she almost believed it. Publicly, everything remained normal. The foundation's calendar kept moving. The city kept smiling. And Carter Montgomery, respected attorney and polished public figure, kept walking into rooms where people trusted him on sight. Privately, Talia had already drawn the line. Paperwork had been prepared. Calls had been made from quiet offices and parked cars. Every decision had a timestamp, and she liked it that way. Everything was set, not for drama, but for certainty. Carter was served divorce papers at his office in front of the same reception desk where associates used to laugh at his jokes. The envelope was plain. The message was not. For a moment, he just stared at it as if it were a prop from someone else's life. Then his face tightened, not with heartbreak, but with offense, like the world had violated an agreement he never planned to honor. He called Talia immediately, not once but 3 times, the way he called clerks and assistants when he expected an answer. "This is a mistake," he said when she finally picked up. "Whatever you think you saw, we can straighten it out. Just tell me where you are." Talia listened to him breathe, listened to the confidence in his voice, and felt something inside her go very still. "I'm safe," she said softly. Then she ended the call before he could turn her life into a negotiation. An hour later, the second envelope arrived, this one carried by people who did not smile for cameras. Federal agents entered Montgomery and Associates with clipped voices and formal paperwork. Offices were secured, and hard drives and files were taken. Partners who had once moved through the courthouse like royalty were separated into quiet corners and told to wait. Nora Robinson was placed under arrest first. Carter followed soon after, his wrists restrained, his expression caught between disbelief and calculation. In a hotel room states away, Talia watched the breaking news clip without sound. The banner at the bottom of the screen reduced years of lies to a few blunt words. Her hands shook anyway, not from doubt, only from the release. She pressed her palm to her chest and let herself feel it for 1 private minute, then wiped her face and went downstairs to the conference like nothing had happened. Chapter 10. The Revelation. 2 days later, Carter sat across from his defense attorney in a conference room that smelled like coffee and expensive paper. The suit he wore was still tailored, but it could not tailor away panic. "This is out of control," he said, choosing the words the way he always did, as if the right phrasing could change reality. "I did not do what they are accusing me of." His attorney did not argue. He opened a folder and slid it across the table with 2 fingers, careful not to touch Carter's hand. "Read it," the attorney said. "All of it." Inside were the federal indictments, the transaction trails, witness statements, and the kind of documentation that does not depend on anyone's opinion. Near the back, clipped behind a divider, were still frames and a short video taken in an office Carter believed belonged only to him. Evidence of the betrayal he thought he could manage, filed beside the crimes he thought no one could see. Carter's mouth went dry. He stared at the images as if looking away could erase them. The truth hit him all at once. Talia had not reacted the way he expected. She had not begged, bargained, or tried to fix him. She had simply documented him, reported him, and stepped aside while the system he thought he controlled turned its full attention on him. In that room, Carter finally understood the difference between being loved and being protected. He had lost both. Epilogue: Rebuilding Legacy. Carter Montgomery accepted a plea deal. 10 years in federal prison and restitution tied to the $10 million that had been stolen. The divorce was finalized soon after, with the headlines trying to turn the ending into entertainment. But revenge in elite circles never ends clean. For weeks, anonymous tips hit the blogs, and old photos were framed as new scandals. Invitations thinned. Friends who once hugged her for cameras suddenly couldn't be seen. Talia let them go. A quieter room was still a room with air. Talia retained what was hers, and she reclaimed something Carter had been quietly taxing for years, her peace. Emma regained conservatorship of her mother, and the stolen funds were returned through restitution and recovery efforts that finally reached beyond one family. Months later, Talia stood at a podium, not as a wife or a victim, but as a woman who chose truth over silence. Power, she said, and her fingers tightened on the edges of the podium, is not in what you can hide. She paused, letting the room decide whether to love her or punish her. It's in what you're willing to tell the truth about, even when it costs you a seat at the table. And as the room stood in applause, Talia Montgomery stepped fully into her next chapter, unbroken, steady, and undeniably free. Thank you for spending this time with LA's Listening Lounge. You just listened to From Wife to Witness. If this story kept you listening, help the channel grow by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who loves a good revenge drama. And tell me in the comments, what moment felt like the point of no return for Talia? When she saw the betrayal, when she hired the investigator, or when she chose to go federal? Until next time, keep your head up, keep your boundaries strong, and I'll see you in the lounge.